A lot biological, aren't we? Okay. So now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of biology. Things like carbohydrates. So what are carbs? Who here says the good stuff? Yeah, they're the good stuff, aren't they? They're the sweet tasting stuff, right? And so carbs is one of the major taste bud groups that we have. You know how many tastes we have that we can actually differentiate? So your taste buds only sense 5 things. There's only 5 tastes. The rest of your taste sensory is actually your nose. Okay? It's the molecules that can get into the air, going up into the back of your nose, and you get a very, very intense smell that you then associate with taste. Okay? And finally, your eyes actually are the last part of that taste. That's why if you ever see anybody do a blind tasting, you mess up a lot because your eyes actually dictate a lot of what you think the taste is. Okay? Not as much your nose. Nose is the primary one. Right? And the taste buds only have 5 flavors. Does anybody know what the 5 flavors are, by the way? No? Does that make you interested? You can look that up sometime. One of them is umami. It's only recently been discovered. Well, by Europe. Yeah. Okay. And so let's talk a bit about carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, commonly known as sugars, of course, and they are one of the primary sources of energy. In fact, they're basically the only source of energy for your brain. Okay? Your brain only uses glucose. That's it. It does not use fats, but you can convert fats into carbs. Can anybody tell me how many carbs they need to eat in their diet? How many essential carbs are there? Nobody? Anybody remember the food pyramid? Okay, what was the bottom of the food pyramid? Grains, which are, like wheat, which is actually carbs, isn't it? Yeah. Do you know how many carbs you actually need in your diet, though? 0. You don't eat any carbs at all in your diet. You actually are capable of making all the carbs you need from other things, so there are no essential carbs. Okay? I know, it's a sad life. It tells you how important they are to your body, that your body can make them from anything. Okay? So all the other energy nutrients you can make carbs from. Okay? Which means they're incredibly important in your body, but also means in your diet, they're absolutely not something you need to eat. Okay? Okay. So the complex carb are going to be things like starches. Are going to be things like insoluble fibers that are found in plants. Yes, this is the fiber that you would see on the back of a box. Do you know what fiber actually is? No? It's all the stuff you can't digest. And does anybody know what the 2 parts come out of you as? So everything you can digest, what does it come out at the end? Urine. Yeah, that's your urine. Okay? Everything you cannot digest, what does that come out as? Feces, right? Okay. And so that's what fiber is, one of the major components. It is stuff you cannot digest. It helps move everything else through so it doesn't develop into problems in you. Okay? Simple sugars are going to serve important structural roles. They're going to be things like our genetic material, our DNA, RNA. They make a variety of different structural molecules, and they get used as parts of different structures as well. So carbs are kind of interesting in that way. Other sugars are going to be served to use as markers on the surface of our cells. It's going to allow molecules to distinguish between the different types of cells. Yes, your body literally has little flags of sugar that say, hey, I'm a friend. Your blood type is literally little flags of sugar hanging off your cells. I love that we're essentially tagged with sweetness, right? That's your tag, okay? So your blood type, your tag, says, hey, I'm sweet. All right. So carbohydrates also play a role in diseases like diabetes and lactose intolerance, of course. Lactose intolerance meaning you're intolerant to the carbohydrate lactose, right? Anybody know what lactose is commonly found in? Yeah, like dairy products, right? Cream being probably the one people end up doing the most. Yeah. Diabetes, on the other hand, is usually a symptom of an insulin issue. And insulin's primary purpose is the release and uptake of sugars. Hey, folks, please don't make me talk over a lot of people, okay? That's an issue, and it's going to ruin my voice. All right, so the simplest carbohydrates are what are called monosaccharides. Mono meaning one. Everybody's comfortable with that, right? Okay. Mono, di. Mono 1, di 2. And then what would it be for 3 or more? Poly. Yeah. Okay, so mono, and then saccharis, which is the Greek word for sugar, so saccharides was derived from that. These are often going to be sweet-tasting sugars that cannot be broken down into simpler carbohydrates. Typically, they just get used as that, and they incorporate into other structures, though they can get converted. Okay? And so those are the one sugars, monosaccharides. Probably the most, so the most common, or in terms of importance, is going to be glucose. And that's going to be a monosaccharide. This is the overall formula for that monosaccharide, though if it's C6H12O6, that does not necessarily mean it's glucose. Okay? Because the different sugars are structure sensitive as well. So remember we were talking about isomers where we could have different structures? This is one place where that's very important. Okay? Okay, so some other monosaccharides that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. The general formula for monosaccharides is CN, so N being the number of carbons, right? So in this case right here, we have 6 carbons, so N would be 6. And then you would have H2O times that number of carbons. So monosaccharides are literally carbons formed into usually rings, is what they're usually in, structure-wise. And they have waters across all the carbons. So you literally have waters across every carbon. Okay? And so that right here, you can notice 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, 6 oxygens. Okay? And so if you have that set up, that's a monosaccharide right there. The whole number has to be 3 or higher. If it's less than 3, it's actually not going to end up being what's considered a saccharide. Okay? There are structures that are similar, less than 3, but they do not actually form saccharides and they don't process the same at all. So disaccharides, these consist of 2 monosaccharide units that have been joined together, usually through a condensation reaction. The disaccharide can be split into 2 monosaccharide units. So, for example, the ordinary table sugar that you'd find on most tables, which is, so full disclosure, sucrose is the most famous of the table sugars, but you may not actually have sucrose if you find table sugar sitting around, okay? It can actually be a blend of sugars or different sugars depending on where you are, right? But sucrose is what's considered the canonical table sugar, okay? And this is sucrose right here. Notice it has 12 carbons, 22 hydrogens, 11 oxygens. Note that we've lost a water. Can everybody see that? Yeah, because we've done a condensation, haven't we? Yeah. Okay, and so if you take in sucrose, what your body does mostly with it is you sit there and you go ahead and hydrolyze these, add a water across it, and you break them up. You form glucose and fructose. Okay. Does anybody know what the most common sugar in an American diet is? Nobody? Okay. What's soda made out of? High fructose corn syrup, right? Okay, what's chips made out of? Fructose again. All these things are fructose, yes. Anybody know why that happened? No? Okay, I'm going to tell you a little fun factoid, and you can make your own deductions about it. Okay? Up until about the 70s, the United States used to supplement growing corn directly by just paying farmers to take that corn and store it. Okay? And it's a measure that's important for our safety in terms of food. So if we ever went through another Dust Bowl, corn stores very well, and then we can pull on those corn reserves, right? And we can last for a year or two. Okay? Also military if that ever happens, right? So after that, there was a big hoobah, and they stopped giving direct supplements. Actually, they caused a huge market crash by doing this because they flooded the market with corn. So they screwed up the economy and then had to fix it. Pretty typical government thing. And they went, we can't do this anymore. And so they came up with a food pyramid. Guess what was on the bottom of the food pyramid? Corn. Okay. And so then they finally figured out, after being told the 5 years before they implemented it, by the 14 best nutritionists in the world, that this is going to make a generation of fat asses and going to kill people's health. So 30, 40 years later, they finally changed it and said the food pyramid is a bad idea. Okay? It's making people fat, and we're having health problems because that is not at all what people should be eating. Okay? And so they changed that to the food circle. And guess what they did with corn? Anybody been to the pumps? They made it so every vehicle has to run ethanol. And they made it so the fuel cycle incorporates ethanol. Do you know how good for the environment that is? How much less carbon goes in the atmosphere because of ethanol? We actually put 1.1 times as much carbon into the atmosphere because of ethanol. So we actually put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's actually really bad for the environment. Yeah. It's not at all an improvement because every single amount of ethanol we get from corn has to be done using fossil fuels to process it. So we actually just front load all the expenditures. And so what they're actually doing is they're finding a use for corn, right? So we can have a reserve of corn, which grows very well in the United States of America, and we have it then for all these different uses in case something happens. And they're just finding different ways to supplement that. The fuel one's actually quite clever. I kind of appreciate the fuel one, to be honest. It's actually kind of a neat idea. Yeah. Because it does actually fix another problem that we have, that to get the correct octane mixture for fuel, you have to add something that burns better. And so that actually lets us create the correct octane mixtures easier. So, yeah, it's kind of a neat idea. I'm okay with it. Anyways, better than trying to feed it people. They don't need it. Yeah. Yeah, feed it to my car, don't feed it to me. I already have problems. Okay, and oligosaccharides, there's going to be carbohydrates that contain 3 to 9 monosaccharide units. So your blood typing groups that are the ABO, these are called oligosaccharides because they contain between 3 and 9 monosaccharides. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, fantastic. So when 10 or more monosaccharide units are joined together, the large molecules are going to result in what's called polysaccharides. I know chemists had to not be super lazy and had to go up to 9. My goodness, we counted past 3. It is a terrible, terrible day. Okay? So oligosaccharides, 3 to 9. Past 9 is polysaccharides. Okay? And so the sugar units that can be connected in one continuous chain, or the chain can be branched, that doesn't really matter in this case. It's not the normal organic rules where it has to be a non-branching continuous chain, right? It doesn't matter in the case of sugars. you can have branches. So starch is a polysaccharide. Everybody's familiar with starch, right? Why are your potatoes white inside? Starch, very high in starch, right? Okay, roots, if you look at the root of a plant, a little bit whitish color, right? And that's because it's a lot of starch. By the way, does anybody know how you can get food almost anywhere on the planet? Or make alcohol, either one. No? And this is one of the reasons why every culture has made alcohol and has this same sort of methodology. You can actually take roots of almost any plant. You can chop them up pretty finely. If you cook them, you can then eat them. And you'll get starches. Some of those will then be broken down, so you get more immediate energy if you cook it and chop it up. And you can eat those. Okay? If you take that, instead of cooking it, throw it into some liquid, just enough liquid to make it wet, spin it, patou. Your enzymes will start breaking down the starch, and then you can actually ferment that. And you can create alcohol. And so this is the most common fermentation method over across the entire planet. Okay? In ancient cultures. They don't do that in modern cultures now, but there's still some of those that exist. Okay? All right, so starch is the polysaccharide in plants. It contains branch chains of glucose that can be broken down to produce energy, but is mostly straight-chained. Okay? Starch is much more straight-chained than the similar molecule in animals. Okay, so this right here is your different ones. In plants, if you look at polysaccharide, you could have chains in the 10,000s. Okay, they're very, very long. They take up a lot of room. They're a lot of weight. All right. Let's talk about some fiber in your diets. Dietary fibers are going to be carbohydrates that we cannot digest with our own enzymes. Anybody know what sort of fibers those would be? Anybody know what the bark on a plant's made out of? Or wood? Cell walls. Okay, they're making cell walls, right? So the name has cell in it. And then ose for the ending, because carbohydrates, right? Cellulose. Anybody heard that one before? No? Oh, it's a little sad. A little sad. Okay, so cellulose is what the plant's walls are made out of. If you get very, very thick cellulose, that's what you start making things like bark out of. Okay, wood. Slight different arrangements, less water and more compacting. Okay, those are all different types of cellulose, right? Anybody know what chitin is? Similar. It's carbohydrate arrangements too. Okay, so like the shells of shellfish. If you start looking at things like shrimp or crabs, or if you look at insects, chitin. Okay. Okay, so anyway, soluble fibers is going to have mixes with water. It's going to form a gel-like substance in the stomach and digestive tract. This is going to give a sense of fullness and slows sugar and cholesterol absorption into the bloodstream, sometimes long enough that you actually expel those things along with the fiber. Some foods that are high in soluble fiber include oatmeal, legumes, peas, beans, and lentils, apples, psyllium, husk, and carrots. And so these are why those things typically show up in diets where you're trying to lose weight, is because if you take in a lot of soluble fiber, then you feel very full, you eat very little comparatively in terms of getting like sugars and fats in your diet, which builds up into fat because it gives you energy. And this also helps to remove stuff and not allow your digestive tract to work as efficiently. Okay? If you're trying to actually gain weight or trying to get energy, by the way, this is not the way to go. Okay? You want to go the exact opposite. Okay? But considering I'm talking to Americans, right, you have plenty of carbs and lipids in your diets and access to those. It's just like ubiquitous everywhere, right? It's actually hard to find stuff that doesn't. Fruit pectins used in making jellies contain soluble fiber as well, and so this is actually why jellies look like they do and why you make them like you do. You take those soluble fibers, you heat them so they get more dissolved. You then pour them into whatever thing you want to do, and then they solidify, right? Okay. So let's talk about insoluble fiber. So this does not mix with the water. It does play a critical role in your digestive tract, though. So insoluble fiber is going to have a laxative effect. It's going to add bulk to your diet, and it'll prevent constipation. Because essentially it gives a lot of solid material that your digestive tract... Do you know how your digestive tract moves stuff? Anybody ever seen that? Okay. It looks like a worm, right? Because it functions much the similar way. In fact, that's basically what a worm is. It's a long digestive tract that moves through and moves soil through. Okay? So the polysaccharide cellulose, this is going to be an insoluble fiber, and it's one of the most common insoluble fibers you're going to encounter because you're going to eat plants. That cellulose is going to get mashed up. Masticated is what it's called. It's what your teeth do, right? Mastication. Okay? And then you're going to swallow it. It's going to move through your digestive tract. It's going to cause things that are in front of it to get pushed along and pushed out. Okay? Okay. Was that a good way to handle? Everybody understood what I was saying? Okay. Fantastic. So the sources are going to include things like whole grains. Do have these, though you got to be very careful because a lot of what's sold as whole grains actually has parts of this cellulose removed. Okay? There's actually a whole gamut of what's considered whole grains that are entirely different things. Right? In the United States. Seeds, brown rice can have it, cabbage, and vegetable stalks and skin always have it. Okay? Your best bet is, by the way, vegetables are almost always a universally good thing for you. Just don't overdo it on things like broccoli, because they can build up urea and cause you to have health problems if you're genetically predisposed to those. Okay? All right, so ethanol, this is one of the simplest members of the families of organic compounds that we call alcohols. And so everybody knows ethanol in this state because it's a requirement, right? Yes, you get your state license revoked if you don't know ethanol, right? Okay. So ethanol, this can be produced from the fermentation of simple sugars and grains and fruits typically. Ethanol is going to be the alcohol that's present in things like liquors, wines, beers, all of those things. It's the alcohol people want to drink usually. Okay. So ethanol is actually the main alternative additive in alternative fuel blends. These have formulations that can be between 15 and 90% alcohol. It had a real popular moment in the conversation of what we're going to do after fossil fuels, gasoline, and diesel, right? It's actually a really fucking terrible idea. But anyways, California spent like $10 billion trying to implement it. Fun fact, they actually had to add additives to all alcohol because of that process that makes you vomit if you drink non-drinkable ethanol. Yeah, they had to add a specific thing to make you throw up. Does anybody know what one of the primary methods for the federal government to get their money is? What one of their largest income brackets is? Alcohol. They tax alcohol, consumable alcohol. And so that's why if you are selling large quantities of alcohol without paying federal taxes, guess who breaks down your door? Ain't the police, ain't the sheriff. It's the FDA. They drive a tank up to your door and break it down with helicopters. With full kit up Army SWAT team level gear. Okay? And that's because it's the FDA. And you're taking Uncle Sam's dollars now. So better not do any backyard moonshining that you sell to others. Okay? You can do it for yourself. Can't sell to others. Okay, so alcohols, these are going to be classified by the number of alkyl groups that are attached to the carbon atoms that are bonded to the hydroxyl group. We have primary, secondary, and tertiary alcohols. So primary alcohol, this is going to have one alkyl group that's attached to the alcoholic carbon atom. And so carbon atoms can be alcoholic, yes. I know. You didn't expect that, did you? Okay. And it's the one that has the alcohol attached. Right? So right here we see this carbon only has one other carbon attached to it, right? So that one is primary. This one here has two other carbons attached to it, and so that one is secondary. That's a secondary alcohol. This one here has three carbons attached to the carbon it's attached to, and so that is tertiary. It's a tertiary alcohol. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, folks. So let's talk a bit about the functional groups and monosaccharides. Members of the aldehyde family always have a carbonyl group, that's an aldehyde right here, with a hydrogen atom that's attached to one side of the carbonyl, right there, and an alkyl or aromatic bond to the ether, the other one. So right there. This one's an aldehyde. Now this one right here is actually formaldehyde. What are we looking at right there, by the way? Is it the brain that has the formaldehyde? No, it's the liquid around it. This is a preserved brain specimen. Okay, and that's the formaldehyde and the liquid around it to prevent bacterial growth. Help preserve it. Okay? This right here, what are we looking at here? This is benzaldehyde. See how those are real shiny looking? So pretty, right? Okay. That wax on them is partially benzaldehyde. Okay. So that's your benzaldehyde right there. Okay, so let's talk about the ketone family. This right here is a ketone. It's where you have a carbonyl between two carbons. Okay, no hydrogen attached to the carbon. Okay. And so the ketone family is very structurally similar to aldehydes, very similar in general. The difference being that the ketones have alkyl or aromatic groups on both sides of that carbonyl. Okay? Has anybody ever heard of ketone before? Keto diet? Ketogenic? Yeah, those are all named after ketone. Okay? So that's the ketones they were talking about. The ketones do occur in a wide variety of biologically relevant compounds. Here we have pyruvate, which is one of the most important molecules in terms of your energy production. It's actually the molecule you go through in one of the most important steps, which is going into the citric acid cycle. Okay, this right here is butadiene, and this is actually the butter flavoring. So this is one of the key components that makes things taste buttery. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of these groups in terms of your sugars. So the monosaccharides that contain aldehyde functional group is referred to as an aldose. So this, for example, right here is an aldose. And that's because it has an aldehyde at the top. Everybody see that okay? Okay. This is the most common way you're going to see your sugars drawn out. I'm going to tell you right now, this is actually not what they look like when they're in water, when they're in the body. Okay? When they're in the body, they actually wrap back around into a circle. So they make cyclic structures. Okay? But this is easier to sit there and identify which one is which. So in almost every textbook, in almost every situation where you see them written out, you're going to see them written out like this. Okay? And that's called a Fisher projection. All right. And so this specific one right here is aldo because it has an aldehyde, hex because it has 6 carbons here, and then ose because it's a sugar, saccharide, right? Okay. Okay, this one here has a ketone. Everybody see the ketone, okay? Okay, so that's going to be a keto or a ketose is the general classification of them. And then it again is going to have 5 carbons, and so pent, and then ose because it's a sugar, right? So we have keto pentose. That'd be the full naming of that. And that'll give you your classification for that sugar. Note that there are 3 carbon ones is triose, as in tri-3, right? The 4 carbons is tetrose. This is a little bit different than the carbon chains. Here we have tetra, right? Because we're using the Greek. Okay. And so tetra, tetros. One with 5 carbons, pentose, 6 carbon hexose, and really that's kind of where things usually end, because after that you don't see a lot of these in biological samples. Okay, you could theoretically make them, and they do exist, but that's kind of where you mostly end up stopping. Okay, you may encounter a heptose. It's possible, but quite unlikely. Okay, so a carbon atom has tetrahedral geometry and 4 different atoms or groups attached to its chiral centers. Remember that chirality we were talking about? Okay, where it has handedness, and you can have 2 different forms depending on its orientation. So a compound that has a single chiral center can exist as what's called 2 enantiomers. These are the 2 opposite forms. Those are enantiomers. So we look here, and how many chiral centers does this glucose contain? So the top one here, this first one, only has 3 different things attached to it, right? And so it can never be chiral. It doesn't have chirality. It's achiral, no chirality. Okay? This one right here, well, it has that. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 different groups, isn't it? And so that one is chiral. Yeah, that's actually a chiral carbon, isn't it? Okay. How about that one there? Yeah, it's chiral again, isn't it? Yeah. So is that one, so is that one. And then finally, this one at the bottom is never chiral as well. Okay. By convention, you always do the most oxidized carbon on the top, the least oxidized one on the bottom. Okay. And then what you do, and these are called Fisher projections again, this is why you always see these in all the textbooks, is that all the lines that are vertical, they're going away from you. Okay? So you're actually looking at a carbon atom that goes like this. Okay? All these carbons, all these oxygen and hydrogens are going out towards you. Okay? And they do that so you can very easily dictate what your chirality of your centers are. And you can just go back and forth. Okay? All right. We'll start up here next time. I'm just going to call that a day and a week and a 2 week. And you all have a wonderful break. And I will see you after that break. And we will finish chapter 6. And it will be amazing. And you will be haunted by the Fisher projections over the break because you'll never got everything you could possibly want out of them.
Have a good break.
Have a wonderful break. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.